Christmas time, it's time for me to start talking about David Tennant. Guess we gotta start at the beginning. The Christmas Invasion, debut episode of David Tennant, the start of the David Tennant era of Doctor Who, and also, weirdly enough, seemed to coincide with the time that a lot of girls were going through puberty and they discovered their first intellectual crush. Will you explain it? Now, it's actually wonderful serendipity that my chain of Doctor Who reviews ended up coinciding wonderfully with Christmas, so I decided to hold off on doing reviews until we got to Christmas. Now, legendarily, Christopher Eccleston had opted to only do one season, and of course, that was a whole sad story right there, one to which I definitely recommend you go to Clever Dick Films. He did the comprehensive history of the Eccleston era, where he actually does allude to a whole lot of issues that went on during the making of the first season. And fortunately, he did have the good grace to warn Russell T Davies that this was the case, and Russell T Davies decided to talk to another actor who he had previously worked with in the TV series Casanova. If you have not seen Casanova, it is actually quite good. I definitely recommend it, so check that out as well. David Tennant, of course, was much more enthusiastic about the project because he had been a lifelong Doctor Who fan. So the idea that he was going to get a chance to play the Doctor was, of course, one that he jumped at. I have talked bad about the David Tennant era in a couple of my videos in the past. Now, I want to get this straight. I don't hate David Tennant as the Doctor. I don't hate any of the actors who play the Doctor. I just say my major problem with it is less about him and more principally about the way his Doctor was written, and even, I'm going to say it, not the best finale a Doctor could ever have. And additionally, I also feel that, I guess you could say much like Tom Baker, when he became like everyone's favorite Doctor and how he kind of overshadowed any of the other ones, I feel David Tennant has been kind of overexposed to the point where I feel like he's kind of clouding everyone's judgment as far as, you know, how great every other actor who's ever played the Doctor is. And I feel like it hurts a lot more because there were many actors who came way before David Tennant did, and there's a lot of great actors who are playing the role now who aren't really getting as much love because they keep comparing it to Tennant. But again, I want to stress, I don't hate David Tennant. And I will say, I do love going back and watching his era because there are some great examples, some that I still consider to be my favorite of Doctor Who. I actually will still say in the new series, the 4th season is still my favorite season of the show. So there's a lot of great, not good, a lot of great that is in the David Tennant era. So I want to clear that right now. You know, I don't hate David Tennant, and I'm not going to say he's my favorite Doctor. He's not going to say he's my least favorite Doctor. He's just not the Doctor that I've been gravitating to of late. So we're leaving it at that. So let's focus on his debut feature, because in my path as a Doctor Who fan, I was elated that the show was back. But unfortunately, the major problem was the show was not airing in America around the time David Tennant was kicking off. The first season had only aired over in Britain. We still had not gotten the broadcast rights for it. So unfortunately, and it made me sick to do it, I had no choice but to watch bootlegs of it on, at the time, YouTube, because around that point, it was actually pretty damn loose about copyright because it was still kind of a fledgling website around that time. So a lot of fans were able to upload the episode to it in segments, so we were able to watch it all. So that was the only way I was able to get my fix of the show. Wow. That was my Tennantism. Also buying region-free DVDs, which I could only watch on my parents' DVD-ROM, which they weren't using, so I was allowed to switch it over to region code 2. So that's another problem I had. But that's the point, is just the fact that it was really hard for me to get my Doctor Who fix because it was only available there. But fortunately, around the time that I was able to finally realize the way I could watch it, season 1 had already aired, and we were approaching, and Christmas was practically on the approach, so I was able to watch The Christmas Invasion on YouTube. Someone finally told me about YouTube, and I was able to watch it there. And that's where I was able to watch The Christmas Invasion in its full entirety. I suppose the reason why I'm talking about all this other stuff before we even get to talking about this episode is because The Christmas Invasion really is a pretty typical story. It's one of those ones that, as they say, does exactly what it says on the tin. It's an alien invasion on Christmas. Now, to its credit, it's a very interesting invasion where they use psych-out tactics in order to get people to submit to them. That was an interesting touch. The whole concept of blood control I actually dug. I thought that was, and I will say the image of seeing a whole bunch of people standing on top of skyscrapers poised to jump off, that was actually a pretty harrowing image. And the one thing I've always given to Russell T Davies, the one thing he's always been great at is human drama. He's always been able to write scenes where people are freaking out over scenes of impending doom, and the scenes where you're watching people walk up to every single roof, and you're watching other people who aren't affected by the blood control. The fact is watching her kids walk and her husband all comatose, and she's freaking out, and she's like, someone help me. And I was like, good, well done, Russell T Davies. He's really good at that. Definitely is a monumental episode, and I will say, prior to everything we saw in season 1, with the exception, of course, the finale, because you had a freaking full-blown Dalek invasion force, this one is definitely one of the bigger episodes up to that point, and it was definitely a standout. But of course, the real reason people jumped in on this one is the fact that we had a new Doctor. Now, this is something I gotta talk about, because one of the benefits of being a dyed-in-the-wool Doctor Who fan when this new series was kicking off was that I was delighted that I was the person kind of giggling in the background while you had all these new people who weren't acquainted with the show. When they saw Eccleston turn into Tennant, it was hilarious watching a lot of them be like, oh no, they changed him, no, I don't like it anymore. They kept doing that, going what David says, oh, you sweet summer child. And every time someone said to me, oh, I don't know, I kind of stopped watching after the second season kicked off because I didn't like that there was a new Doctor. Why did they do that? And I'm like, and this is the age of the internet. You have no excuse. Do your research. So for everyone else who is getting used to this new idea of regeneration, my first exposure to Doctor Who was a regeneration. So I was already acquainted with it. And in fact, regeneration was one of the things that attracted me to the series. So I was way ahead of the game in this. So I kind of cracked up about it. Now, my whole thing is that I wanted to see how this Doctor was going to be compared to Eccleston. Because the one thing I got to give to Eccleston was that he brought the Doctor down to a down-to-earth level, which his predecessors were all very fanciful, very whimsical, and very eccentric. Whereas you got Eccleston in the leather jacket and the crew cut, he looked very normal. So I wasn't used to that. So I didn't know if they were going to follow in that trend or were they going to go, something a bit more old school. And the one thing I can give to Tennant is that he actually was a solid combination of both. Even though he did have some great moments of alien eccentricity, he still had moments where he actually had, very serious dramatic moments. He was able to have levels. I think my major issue with him throughout the run of his era is the fact that he kind of operated in extremes. It was either he was all the way up here, or he was all looking here all broody and all that stuff. There was never any kind of real level of subtlety about him. But I think the reason why I don't ultimately begrudge him of that is that it complemented the writing that Russell T Davies gave him. In fact, when you actually look at David Tennant's performance in Day of the Doctor under Moffat's writing, I did notice that his performance was a lot more subtle by comparison. So I think it all really does come down to the way Russell T Davies' writing complemented David Tennant and his acting choices, and probably by the way the show was being directed at that point. So it's a combination of things. It just goes to show when an actor and a writer work very closely in tandem with each other, they can mold the show to become this one singular identity. That's again why I'm always gonna fight for the way the show's going, because it's just a phase of the show. It's just a new identity of the way it looks. It's just a new regeneration of the show, and it's going to change to something different later on down the line. Some will like it, some will not. This one, especially in this grand scheme of everything that's happened before and after, it's not my favorite era, but it's definitely an important era, and I will always acknowledge that. Now, as far as this as an introduction to a new Doctor, the one thing I got to give to Russell T Davies, it was actually kind of a masterstroke the way he teases us with David Tennant as the Doctor, because he spends the majority of the episode in bed, and you only get little glimpses of what he can do with the pre-credit sequence, one little bit where he wakes up for like only a couple minutes. That's all you got until the tail end. And I will say, because they tease you with these images, when you finally get to that incredible moment where Rose realizes that the Sycorax are being translated, and then the camera pushes past Rose towards the TARDIS and the door opens and the Doctor is awake and he's pretty much firing on all cylinders. It's an incredible moment, and I get the feels every time I watch it, because Russell T Davies does have such a good grasp on dramatic progression. He's able to get you hyped up, and then when the time comes when you actually get to really see the Doctor in all of his glory, it doesn't disappoint. And I will say, when David Tennant is let off the leash in that first scene, he's hilarious, he's unpredictable, it hints at a lot of the promise that the character is going to have down the line. And I will say it is one of my favorite times where an actor in their first episode as the Doctor is able to just cut loose. In a way, it kind of reminds me of Tom Baker, one of Tom Baker's early scenes in Robot. The scene where he does jump rope with Harry Sullivan, especially because they abide by the principal rule that a doctor should always be different from his predecessor. Fortunately, for every other new audience who's not used to seeing a doctor like this, that it really kind of, puts them on the weird foot, is like going, this doctor's kind of crazy. This doctor's kind of insane and kind of impulsive. And yeah, a bit rude, which is something they oddly dropped after a while, which is strange. I can see how people could get frustrated. They're like, come on, we want to see the doctor. We want to see the doctor. He's just in bed. He's just in bed. But the thing is, when you get to that moment, it makes everything that comes prior to it worth it, which is good because I will say, everything leading up to this moment, there are some moments where the story does tend to plod a bit. For a lot of the other characters, it's all them pretty much standing stationary in one spot. I mean, you do have one bit where Rose and Mickey narrowly avert the robot Santas. And you do have the great bit with the killer Christmas tree, but then for the most part, they spend a lot of it in Rose's flat with her mom and with Mickey. The lead-in up to it, I mean, thank God they decided to bring back Harriet Jones because she actually had some of my favorite moments in the episode. And it did kind of kill me that they decided to depose her as Prime Minister, because I would have loved to have seen further times where the Doctor has moments with Harriet Jones. It kind of felt like a missed opportunity there, especially just because Penelope Wilton is such a wonderful actress and is so good in the role of Harriet Jones. And she really does command a lot of the scenes she's in, I think. And also another one which I did giggle at is a bit where her aide actually asks, it tells her that the President of the United States wants to take this over, and she just flat out says, he's not my boss and he's not turning this to a war. And I'm like going, burn! Suffice to say, I wasn't that crazy on W either. I just didn't realize something worse was going to come way after. Debates are still raging to this very day of whether or not the Doctor was right to do so. And on one side, I'm kind of on the Doctor's side on that, because I'm always on the Doctor's side, so big shock. But funny enough, I've had this debate with Lynn a couple times, and she's actually on Harriet Jones's side. And I kind of like that, the fact that there's still debates going on about that, because that's good thematic sci-fi material. That's the times when a material challenges you to the point where there's no real clear-cut way to determine whether or not one character is in the right or the other one is. And that's just good. That's good writing right there. I think my only sadness is that because the Doctor did what he did, we never really got to see more of Harriet Jones as Prime Minister. But at the same time, though, we do get what we get with Harriet Jones later on, which is still works incredibly well. So there's wins and there's losses on that level. The sad part is I really can't say much about the Christmas Invasion as far as its merit as a Doctor Who story, because it's a relatively simple story. Now, granted, a episode that's introducing a new Doctor really shouldn't be that complicated. I think one of the major failings of Time in the Ronnie was that was needlessly overcomplicated, and as a result, you never really got a chance to get a good ebb and flow of that Doctor. I mean, Castrovalva, fortunately, was able to deliver its ideas, in very plain terms that it still made it enjoyable. And even then, you still had moments where you got to see the Doctor constantly. So people expecting just one thing, you don't want to bury everything in a lot of scientific gobbledygook. So it's not a episode with a lot of depth to it. I would even say just a lot of the characters who aren't the Doctor do tend to get a little dull at times. But really, apart from the Doctor's unveiling and his big sword fight with the King of the Sycorax, or whatever the hell you want to call him, and that really sweet final scene of the episode as a whole, the Christmas Invasion really is kind of an unremarkable story when it comes to any kind of surprises, really. It's kind of a by-the-number story. It has a mission, and it achieves that mission. Another thing to note about this episode is that this did start a tradition for the show, at least until Chibnall came along. Come on, Chibbers. Every year, people would always expect, even when they have a gap year, that there would always be a Christmas episode of Doctor Who. And this is where it kicked off. Now, I do enjoy the Christmas episodes, principally just because any excuse to get more Doctor Who is never a bad thing with me. I think my only problem with most of the Christmas episodes is that a lot of them don't really take advantage of Christmas. With the exception of Robot Santas and A Killer Christmas Tree, which are pretty much over and done with almost immediately, the rest of the episode really doesn't really focus on Christmas a lot. So it definitely leaves you to wonder what was even the point of setting this at Christmas. Really. That's actually a problem with a lot of Christmas episodes. So I guess I may have to actually talk about a lot of the other Christmas episodes to come. So, unless by necessity I have to talk about an episode out of order, I think every Christmas, I'm going to talk about a Christmas episode of Doctor Who and talk about why some are better than others. So, in the meantime, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that Christmas Invasion is one of the best Doctor debuts? Do you think it's one of the best Christmas episodes? Leave it in the comments below. And for more festive content on Narcotic Casserole, simply like, share, subscribe, click. Thou shalt be served.